So for all intents and purposes, we kind of did pay for the stock, or we are paying for it because the money that it costs to buy the stock is already taken away, put in the box that says, don't touch me. And we can't touch it until we take the put off or until we get assigned and buy the stock with it. So it's kind of like either way we're paying for it.
Hello, Wealth Builders. You're listening to Wealth Building with Options. Here's your host, Dan Passarelli.
Hey, Wealth Building family. Welcome to episode 23, The Day I Bit the Nurse. But before we jump in today, let's talk about how you can get the most out of the Wealth Building with Options community. First, consider sharing this podcast with like-minded people. Word of mouth is the best way to grow our community for all of us. And the more people you share ideas with, the more you grow as a trader. The second thing you can do is to support the show with a paid subscription. For the cost of one of those fancy schmancy Starbucks once a month, you'll get video extra podcast episodes and option trade posts where I drop into the deep end of the market, share trade rationales, and talk about what's going on with a really deep dive, and chronicle my covered call and cash secured put trades that I'm making in my real brokerage account. Plus, you'll get access to our monthly Ask Me Anything session and actually a whole lot more. To get all this, go to my Substack at wealthbuildingwithoptions.substack.com and subscribe to the monthly or annual subscription. Now, let's tune in to higher frequency trading. Okay, so I was thinking about this just the other day. I remember being like 9 years old or so, and I was sick. I had a sore throat. So my mother brings me to the doctor's office. I took me out of school, interrupted me from watching Batman or The Courtship of Eddie's Father or whatever it was I was watching, Banana Splits. And we had to go to the doctor, right? He's got to look at this sore throat. And I can still remember that doctor's office. I can remember the hall, how the carpet felt, the smell of the doctor's office. You remember that from when you were a kid? You remember going to the doctor? Now, one of the things that I liked about the doctor, my favorite thing about going to the doctor's office is what? What do you think it is? Okay, I'll tell you what it is. Reading Highlights magazine. Remember Highlights magazine? Because you couldn't get those at home. I imagine you could, but I didn't think you could get them at home. I thought they only existed in doctor's offices. And they were really, really cool. You remember those? What was your favorite? Remember they had like the stuff hidden in pictures and you had to find it, and like the what's wrong pictures where there's some dude who has a fish for a mustache, and Gallant and Goofus. Do you remember that one? Where it's like two pictures side by side, and one was this kid Gallant and he was always being nice, and Goofus was always being a little jerk all the time. Well, my favorite thing from Highlights magazine, hands down, I would always turn right to this page, was the spot the difference pictures. That's where there were two pictures side by side, and at first glance, you look at them and you're like, oh yeah, these are the exact same pictures. But no, they're not the same pictures. You've got to kind of dive in and spot the difference. And there would be like, I don't know, 12, 15, whatever it is, things that are just a little bit tiny difference in the right picture instead of the left picture. So I'm sitting there going through the magazine, looking at the spot the difference, trying to find what's wrong with this one, what's different in this one. And so the nurse comes to get me and my mother, brings us into the doctor's office, and, does the whole 9 yards, takes my temperature, which of course was like under the tongue, not like just shoot the little gun at your forehead like they do now. Did the blood pressure, I imagine, asked all the dumb questions. How do you feel? Well, I have a sore throat. Oh, how else do you feel? Well, I have a sore throat. And then, because I have a sore throat, you know what comes next? The throat culture, where they take a Q-tip, a long Q-tip, but in this case, not really long enough, and cram it down your throat into your uvula and like bat that little thing around like a punching bag. And it makes you like gag. And so I don't know, maybe it was the bad news, maybe it was the gag reflex, but you know how this went down, right? Yeah. So I just bit her. Yeah, and it was like it was not on purpose. It was not on purpose. Just like shoving this Q-tip down my throat into my uvula. I'm coughing, gagging, my eyes are watering, and my teeth just clamped down on the nurse's finger. And I don't remember if I drew blood or whatever, but she wasn't very happy about it. So shortly following that, I get the shot in the butt, which I don't know. I probably didn't even need it. She was probably just pissed at me. I was the goofus in this scenario, I guess, right? So yeah, shot in the butt. And do they still even do that with kids? I don't know. I don't remember. Kathleen always took the kids to the doctors when they were sick. Do they still give kids shots in the butt? I guess they probably do, right? I know they do with babies. I remember that. I was always going to those. But yeah, so I'm sure the nurse could not wait to get rid of me. And I was just a kid. I was like 9 years. I don't know. Was I 9 years old? What is an appropriate age for a kid to have bitten the nurse? That's how old I was, right? So, yeah. Anyway, what I was thinking about recently was this spot the difference picture thing in Highlights magazine because they were just so darn fun to do. But it kind of leads into what I'm thinking about here for this episode. And we're going to talk about two strategies today. Let me start out. There's covered calls, which you know what those are, right? You own the stock and then you sell a call. But then there's a buy right. I don't think we really talked about buy rights. I know I mentioned them on last week's show, on the last episode. So a buy right differs from a covered call a little bit. It's almost kind of like a technical difference, but it's kind of a mental difference too. Covered call, again, I own the stock. I might have bought it last year or last week or yesterday. And today, I decide to sell a call. With a buy right, I do them both at the same time. I buy the stock, and as part of one single trade, a spread, I also sell or write the call. One trade. Long stock, short call, push the button, boom, they're both done. So that is the very, very subtle difference between a buy right, which is called a buy right because you buy the stock, and right, which is the options trader fancy word for sell a call. That's the subtle difference between the buy right and the covered call. But those are not the two strategies that I want to talk about today. The two strategies that I actually want to talk about are the buy right and the cash secured put. Because remember the last episode? I hope you remember the last episode. I only released it a week ago. You ought to remember it. And for those of you who are binging it, you might have just listened to it 5 minutes ago. In the last episode, we talked about synthetics. And we talked about how having a covered call position and having a cash geared put position are synthetically identical. Well, there's still that timing, but if I were to make a trade today, if I made a buy right trade or I made a cash geared put trade, well, then I would be executing two positions that are exactly very, 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 very similar. And they would be synthetically identical. So let's go through kind of an example of both of these. And then let's talk about this. Imagine that you have a stock that is at, say, $73. Okay? Well, $73.09. I don't like to make it just like totally plain, exactly even number. That's just too textbook. So if you're not driving or you're not running, these are the two things that I'm typically doing when I'm listening to a podcast, and I binge the crap out of them while I'm driving somewhere or running for 4 miles or something. If you're not running or driving, grab a pen and write this down so that it's a little easier to visualize what we're talking about. For those of you who are driving or running or doing some other thing where you can't grab a pen, I am going to do a video extra on this, but still listen so that you get the gist of it. And then when I do the video extra, it's just good refresher and you'll be able to see some numbers and such. Okay. So let's imagine this. We're thinking about putting on a trade that is a buy right. We're thinking about buying the stock, which we can buy now at $73.09. And at the same time, selling the 77 strike calls, which we can sell now at 89 cents. Okay. Buy the stock at 73.09. Sell the 77 calls at 89. All right. Got it. Let's look at some of the relevant data for this trade here. What would be the maximum profit? Okay, let's think it through. I'm buying the stock at 73.09 and it can go up to 77. And if it's above there by expiration, I would sell the stock. So 77 minus 73.09 is what? $3.81 plus the option premium of 89 cents means my maximum profit is $4.80. Okay. 77 minus 73.09 plus 89 cents. Again, if you're not using pen and paper, just work with me. You don't really have to think through the math. Just remember the end result, which I'll remind you of again in a minute anyway. How would I outperform the buy and hold strategy doing this? By 89 cents, because that's the only difference here, right? I own the stock, so I'm going to make money or lose money as the stock goes up or down, but I get to keep the 89 cents. So I outperform as long as we're below the strike price. What's my break even? My tracked cost discount on the stock? Well, if I'm buying the stock at 73.09, but I'm also taking in 89 cents, it's just 73.09 minus 89, 72.20. All right. And again, you don't have to remember all these numbers. It's kind of hard to visualize, but the idea is I'm basically buying the stock less by the amount of the call premium. I'm risking, now this is kind of important. I'm risking that much. That break even point, 72.20, which again is 73.09 minus 89. That break even point, that's the most I can lose, right? I can lose everything I paid for the stock, but I still keep the 89 cents. So it's really just 72.20. My commissions, I pay a commission when I buy the call, and I pay a commission on the stock as well. Okay. Remember, we were talking last week about the synthetics. So instead of doing that, I could just simply sell a 77 strike put. Now, knowing full well that the stock is at 73.09, we want to make sure we're thinking about this clearly. I'm selling an in the money put here. But I want to make sure that this is a cash secured put, right? Because we're investors. So I'm going to hold $7,700 of cash in a reserve in case I'm assigned. Now, all that said, because the 77 put is in the money, it's going to be a little meatier because it's going to have intrinsic value and time value. So I'd sell it at something like $4.75. So even though the strike price is 77, so my broker is going to hold the cash reserve of $7,700, I still have the $4.75 that I collect from selling the put. So really, I'm holding less cash than that. And where I'm going with this is it's pretty darn comparable to what I would do if I sold the buy right instead. So the maximum profit on the buy right, the first one we talked about, was $4.80. The maximum profit on this cash cured put is what we sold it for, which is $4.75. So, pretty close. The outperformance from just going and buying the stock on the buy right, well, what was that? That was, the amount that I collected on the call, 89 cents. Outperformance of the buy and hold strategy with this cash cured put, it's a little bit different. It's not the whole value of the put because remember, we're selling a put that's in the money. So we're actually buying the stock at a higher price than where it's trading. But that's okay because that intrinsic value makes up for that difference. So an in the money cash secured put is going to outperform simply owning the stock by the time value of that put. So we take the amount of the put, which is $4.75, minus the intrinsic value, and that is what we are left with, the time value of 84 cents. So, that's pretty similar too, 89 cents versus 84 cents. Okay. How about our break even? Well, we would just simply take our strike price minus the entire premium of the put, intrinsic and time value. So 77 minus $4.75 is $72.25. Now, again, don't get hung up on the arithmetic. All you really got to know is that the break evens are close. The break even for the buy right was $72.20. The break even for the cash secured put is $72.25. So we're risking just a little bit more. As far as commissions go, I only pay a commission on the put because there's only one option. So, quick recap. As far as metrics go, these are pretty darn similar. Max profit, 475 versus 470. Outperformed the buy and hold strategy, 84 cents versus 89 cents. Break even, $72.20 versus $72.25. Very, very similar. Notably, the buy right does seem to be a little bit better than the cash secured put, but we'll come back to that in a second. Okay, so what else might be similar? Well, the deltas might be similar, right? And we talked about that on the last episode a little bit when it comes to synthetics, because look, if I look at the calls delta and I look at the puts delta when they have the same strike price in the same expiration, which I called the put call pair in the last episode. If I look at the call delta and the put delta in the put call pair and forget about the positive negative sign, just add those suckers together, that's going to come out to about 100. Because if I buy a call and sell a put, that's synthetic stock and it's got to be 100, right? If that doesn't make sense, go back and listen to the last episode again, or if you missed it, why'd you miss it? I guess if this is your first exposure to this show, it's okay if you missed it, but don't go around skipping episodes. I'm doing this in sort of a linear kind of fashion. It's intended to go in order, so don't skip episodes. All right. So the deltas of these two positions, buy right and cash cured put, they're going to be very, very similar. Why? Well, because the delta of the put is whatever the delta of the put is. It's in the money, so it's greater than 50. Let's just say that maybe it's 65, right? If I'm selling a put, I'm getting positive 65 deltas. But if I sell a call, well, the call delta should be 35, obviously, right? Because 65 plus 35 equals 100. So I'm selling a call, I'm getting short 35 deltas, but I'm long 100 shares, which is long 100 deltas. Long 100 deltas minus 35 deltas is what? Oh, it's 65 deltas. So, right, the deltas are going to be very, very similar. The Vegas, if you look at in the option chain, and again, we will look at this on a video extra, but it's kind of just easy to talk about too. The Vegas are going to look identical because stock has no Vega, but the call and the put in the put call pair will have the same Vegas. Theta is where it gets a little bit different. And this is where we get into the spot the difference thing, right? We're looking at these two pictures or these two option positions, and at first blush, oh yeah, they're about the same. And they are about the same. But there are just a couple little differences. In this one, the guy has a mustache. In this one, the guy has a fish instead of a mustache. But you got to look really closely to realize that, because the fish kind of looks like a mustache. All right. So let's go through what is different here. First of all, the call is out of the money, which is very common in a covered call and is sometimes common in a buy right as well. With the cash cured put, that is in the money. Now, why is it in the money? Well, it's in the money because we're using the same strike price for both. We're using the 77 strike price on each of these. All right? So that's actually not a difference. That's a similarity. One's out of the money, one's in the money, but they're the same strike price. Where it becomes a little bit of a difference is when we start thinking about middling markets. Because when we look at an option chain, the bid-ask spreads of out-of-the-money options, they tend to be very tight. And why is that? It's because they have small deltas, and the market makers who, as soon as they buy a call, they're going to sell short stock as a delta hedge, they don't have to do too many shares. So they don't have a ton of risk. But if it's big delta, they've got to do a lot of shares. And if the stock moves, they can easily turn a good trade into a pretty lousy trade. So that's why you tend to see smaller delta out of the money options having tighter bid-ask spreads. So here we have that out of the money 77 call in the buy right. Little delta. Okay, no big deal. We have that in the money cash secured put. Big delta because it's in the money. Oh, kind of a big deal. Now, as I think about it, I say that, and if you think about it, because both of these positions actually have the same delta because we're adding stock to the buy right one, it kind of gets a little bit wonky. What the market maker actually has to do to hedge is because the market maker is selling you 100 shares of stock and buying from you one call or some multiple of it, 200 shares and two calls, 500 shares and five calls. Because they're selling the shares, they're selling too many shares. That's how they get that bigger delta. So they have to buy the shares back. And if the stock moves, well, that's a little bit dangerous. The stock does have a tighter bid ask spread than the options usually. But if it moves, they've got a lot of shares to buy. So that ends up kind of being a little bit weird. There's also, though, and I mentioned this already, there's two commissions on the buy right. There's a commission for selling the call, and there's a commission for buying the stock. With the cash secured put, there's only one commission. But what happens when you get assigned? Well, that kind of depends on your broker. If your broker doesn't charge a commission on getting assigned, then there's no commission. What if it expires? Well, there's probably no commission. But you never know. This is something you might want to make sure you find out about first. All right, the next thing. If we look at what we observed when I was talking about similarities and focus on the fact that while they're similar, they're not exact. The put often looks worse. Selling this cash secured put compared with doing a buy right, the buy right's always going to look like it outperforms a little bit better. But in reality, from at least a theoretical standpoint, and for some people, for some classifications of traders, it's not worse. What are you talking about, Dan? All right, well, let me tell you. If we go and look at the thetas of the call and the put in the put call pair, the thetas of the call are typically going to be bigger than the thetas of the put. So just make a note to look at this at some point in the future, or for those of you who are paid subscribers, I'm going to show this to you in the video extra. Either way, just take a look at this because this is usually the case. The theta for the call in the put call pair is bigger than the theta for the put in the put call pair. Why is that? Well, it has to do with interest. You believe that? I bet you didn't see that one coming. I mean, unless you've been paying attention to the last episode. It has to do with interest. Because market makers who sell a put, what do? Well, they also sell shares of stock to hedge to get delta neutral. So when they sell those shares of stock, they collect cash because they're borrowing the shares, and they do have to pay like an interest type fee to the person they're borrowing them from. And they have to pay a margin on it, of course, or not pay a margin, but post a margin, of course. But then they sell the shares and they get cash put in their account. And professional traders, anyway, will earn a short stock rebate. That is the interest that you get on the cash that goes in your account from selling short a stock. Okay, so I can sell this call as a market maker. Let's think about this as a market maker where I'm a delta neutral trader. I hedge the delta of all my options by buying or selling shares of stock. I sell whatever call this is. Well, I've got to buy shares of stock to neutralize that negative delta. And that, oh, geez, I've got to borrow stock and pay interest on that. Pay interest. But if I sell the put instead, Well, I've got to sell shares of the stock against that long delta of the short put. And I collect interest on that. So to balance out the theta, I would need a bigger theta on the call because I've got to pay interest as a result of that if I'm a delta neutral trader. But if I'm selling the put, I collect interest, so I don't need as much theta. So that's the glue that kind of holds it together. Now, as far as you're concerned, if you're looking at the difference between a buy right and a cash cured put, well, you're not delta hedging, but you are long shares of stock against the short call. So I guess you do still have that interest component anyway, right? So that is why, friends, the thetas of the call and the put in the put call pair are different. Next thing to look at, and this one is an important one, and it's kind of an obvious one. We don't have to like really be sitting there and thinking about it and hitting the back button on your phone that takes the podcast tape or whatever it is back 15 seconds. Oh, wait, is 15 seconds going to do it? Oh, I better hit it twice. 30 seconds. Wait, this might be 45 seconds. No, the dividend one is actually really, really easy. You're probably not even going to have to rewind it. So the dividend one, if I own the stock and I'm short a call, well, I own the stock. So if they pay a dividend and I'm holding those shares of stock the afternoon before the X date on the close, the day before the X date, I'm going to end up getting paid that dividend because I actually own the shares. Okay? If I'm selling a cash secured put, I don't own the shares. It's in the money. I'm probably going to get assigned and own them at some point in the future, but I don't own them now. So I'm not going to get the dividend. And that, friends, is a very important difference. And that can drive your decision on, hey, Passarelli told me on Wealth Building with Options that a buy right and a cash secured put are the same thing. So I guess it doesn't matter what I do. Oh, but this stock is going to pay a dividend. I'm going to do the buy right so I capture that dividend. If there's no dividend, that part doesn't matter at all. Or if I just plan on holding this for a couple of weeks, but the X date isn't for another month, it doesn't matter at all either there. Now, the other thing to think about is the timing of it all. And the conversation here on dividends segues really, really nicely into thinking about the timing of it all. And we've talked about this before, but man, this is one of these that you kind of, sometimes some people need a little bit of a reminder of this one. So we do own the stock with the buy right, and we did pay for the stock with the buy right. So we have all that downside risk. And we have a maximum profit potential because if it's through the call strike price at expiration, we have limited profit. With the cash secured put, we don't own the stock now, but it doesn't really matter. It's kind of like we own the stock because what we did when we sold the put as a cash secured put is we secured the future purchase of those shares of stock by letting our broker take the money that it's going to cost for the stock and just tuck it away in a little tiny box in our account that says, "Don't touch me." So for all intents and purposes, we kind of did pay for the stock, or we are paying for it because the money that it costs to buy the stock is already taken away, put in the box that says, "Don't touch me." And we can't touch it until we take the put off or until we get assigned and buy the stock with it. So it's kind of like either way we're paying for it. I mean, there is that interest difference where that money that's tucked away, we actually earn interest on it. We're owning the stock, we don't earn interest on it. But that's all wrapped up in the theta like we talked about. Either way, at expiration, stock's below the strike, we have shares because we already had the shares with the buy right. We're going to get the shares with the cash secured put. Above the strike, we don't have shares. It's going to get assigned with the buy right. And the put's going to expire. So either way, we don't get shares. So I guess that's more similar than different. And then finally, I would say maybe the most important difference between the buy right and the cash secured put is how you think about it. And really, that's probably one of my most deciding factors. I mean, maybe outside the dividend thing, is how my brain processes what that position is. Because if I sell a buy right, buy the stock, sell the call, same trade, the way my brain's thinking about it is, okay, I bought the stock and I've got this cushion to the downside by the amount of the call. And if the stock goes up, then I make money on the stock and the call and I sell it. And all that's okay because I don't really think it's going to move that much. So that's how my brain is processing that. But if I'm instead going to do the cash secured put, well, first of all, a lot of the time I don't do the in the money put. A lot of times when I'm doing the cash secured put, I'm doing it at the money or even more commonly out of the money. So that's sort of a really practical and tactical difference. With the cash secured put, if it's at or out of the money, so lower strike, then what I'm thinking is, yeah, I want to buy this stock, but I want to buy it at a lower price than where it's trading now. So maybe I'll buy it on the dip, but I'm also going to get to keep that put premium. And if the stock goes up, well, I don't think it's going to go up that much, so I don't think I'm going to miss too much opportunity. And really, I'm saying the same thing with both of these things, except I'm thinking about it differently. I'm saying slightly different words in my brain, in my internal dialogue, but those slightly different words are the result of me thinking about them differently, even though they're basically the same thing. So on the next episode, what we're going to talk about is we're going to talk about short-term buy rights and, hey, maybe even long-term buy rights. Maybe we can compare and contrast those. These are in your future for either the next show or the next few shows. It all depends on how long it takes to talk about the short-term ones. But those are two different strategies in my mind as well because of the time horizon of each trade. I don't want to spoil the next episode. So that wraps it up. Before you go, help grow the Wealth Building with Options community by subscribing to it in your favorite podcast app. When you do, you'll be the first to hear the next episode and hear about those short-term and maybe even long-term buy rights. That said, friends, see you then. And in the meantime, trade excellently.
Options involve risk and are not suitable for all investors. Before buying or selling an option, read characteristics and risks of standardized options. A link is provided in the show notes. To learn more about your host, Dan Passarelli, please visit markettaker.com.